Good evening, everyone. Thank you for joining me for the topic of building rapport. My name is Natalia Gutierrez. To start, I would like to just share a little bit of information about myself so that you know where you're getting your information from. Um, I started in the field of applied behavior analysis back in 2018. I started as an RBT in Tennessee. I am a South Florida girl, so I did move for the job, and I stayed with it for a couple years before deciding to go back to school to get my master's in ABA and OBM, Organizational Behavior Management, from Florida Tech, and I graduated there in 2022. Um, After graduation, I practiced as a BCBA, and my specialty has always been working in early intervention, so kiddos from the ages of about 2 to 6. Um, and I felt like I needed a change being back in, being in Florida. So I was like, why not come back to Tennessee? And that's when I found the job at TAC, and I am now the site director of a new clinic here in Smyrna. So let's just dive into it. What is building rapport? Now, it is defined as the process of creating a connection with someone based on trust, respect, and understanding. Feels like it's pretty simple, but there are so many different strategies that can be implemented in with to build rapport. So we'll be discussing that today. But why is it important? Let's go over that first. You might hear your child's technicians use the word pairing. That is something that we say in the field of ABA. So if they say pairing, it just means that they're having a good old time with your kiddo during the rapport building and pairing. You are likely to understand your child's likes and dislikes. This could increase happiness for the entire family. Maybe your other children learn how to pair or build rapport with your child who has an ASD diagnosis. It's sometimes not too easy to build rapport with our kiddos. So, when you finally learn the strategies that work for you and your family, then it can definitely increase happiness amongst everyone. And with that, you create stronger relationships and create an environment of fun and encouragement. Now, how do we build rapport? These are just different strategies that we'll be getting into individually tonight. You want to be present and attentive. You want to show genuine interest and respect personal space or personal boundaries. You'll want to find common interests and use positive reinforcement. You want to remind yourself to be patient and flexible, along with establishing consistency and maybe routine. You want to use humor, but I encourage you to use it appropriately and incorporate sensory preferences. And you'll want to encourage expression. Before we dive into each of those individually, I want to show you guys or tell you guys how to measure happiness. So during your interactions with your kiddo, that you might find, okay, it's a little difficult for me to create this connection or create this bond with my child. Hopefully I'm able to teach you guys some strategies. But during these interactions, how do I know whether my child is happy or not? There is a study from way back when in 1996. Many studies and published articles have been based off of this research, but it's quite simple. In order to measure happiness, the things that you want to look for are smiles. Does my kid smile when I'm interacting with them? Do they laugh? Or some kiddos might scream when excited or happy, or they might even engage in different types of stereotypy or what you guys might call stimming. This could be that they're flapping their arms, they're jumping up and down repetitively. And so these are all signs that they are happy. I do encourage you to make sure that you're paying attention to their facial affects when they are yelling, because maybe they're not quite happy or mood just changed. And so something to pay attention to. But these are just a few ways to measure happiness. So the first strategy is to be present and attentive. Now, I understand as an adult, as a parent, you can't give your child 24/7 attention. There are chores to be done, there are phone calls to be made. But when you're intentionally trying to build rapport or pair with your child, I encourage you to give your full attention during the interaction by putting down the phone. Um, when you're putting down the phone, and these are just examples, but you'll be prepared to help or to answer questions. You're making yourself more available. When you're on the phone, you are likely to not understand the question or not quite hear what is being asked. So then you're asking them to repeat themselves. So that just avoids that situation. You'll also want to follow their lead. During rapport building or pairing, there is very little instruction or demands placed on a child. So instead of asking them to do things, you're following them. So an example might be that because you are fully attentive, they start to reach for a container of Legos, but you're on it. And so you are able to reach the container of Legos for them, and you open the container and make that thing accessible immediately. Or maybe they are playing with Legos and they decide, you know what, I'm tired of playing with Legos, so I'm going to switch to Play Doh. And so you also leave the Legos behind and switch over to playing with Play Doh. So just follow their lead. Another strategy is to show genuine interest. You want to ask open ended questions if your kid is vocal or has a way of being vocal, whether it's through an AAC device or through PECs, but to ask open-ended questions during interactions. Now, when you ask yes/no questions, this often will cut off the conversation pretty quickly. So when you ask a question or a phrase that begins with "do," this leads to yes/no. Do you want to play outside? Yes or no. Do you want to play with Legos? They will respond yes or no. However, if you ask questions that begin with what, why, or how, this will often lead to a more specific response or a longer response. So, what do you want to play with? Very basic question, but then they will tell you exactly what they are in the mood for playing with. Or you say, why do you want to play with Legos? Well, I want to build with you. Or how? If your kiddo, at the end of the day, you pick them up from the clinic or from school and you say, hey, how was your day? They might say, oh, it was good. Or I, I was upset at some point, or I had fun. Then you can ask them about the different activities that they engaged in that day. You can also show genuine interest by listening actively and engaging with their responses. So maybe you, the adult, or you have one of their siblings, another of your children, playing with them. What I pictured was having a kiddo in a car with like almost one of those wagon handles that you can push them. And so you say, hey, how fast do you want to go? And the child says, super fast. And then you say, then let's go super fast. And you are, while saying that, you are then engaging in that action, engaging with their response, and you're having fun together. Another example, kind of what I just mentioned previously, was how was your day at school? And your child says, well, John isn't my friend anymore. And then you ask them, to tell you to tell you what happened. And this just keeps the conversation going, and so you're staying engaged, and hopefully uh, they can engage in that conversation with you. This might not apply for our really early learners who are more non-vocal, but for those who are, conversation is very important. Other examples of showing genuine interest might be to make contextual sounds. So, an example of this would be while playing with cars, you say zoom as you make the car go really fast, or you might make a honking sound with a truck. Um, to let you guys know that through building rapport, you can teach your child so many skills with that repetition and making those sounds. Your child can also pick up on making those sounds, and then maybe that translates into making those sounds when playing with peers. Another example would be to comment, or another strategy would be to comment on or narrate their play. I'm very passionate about this. I think it's a really important strategy to implement when building rapport. So an example might be to, when coloring or drawing, you say, I love all of the colors you're using. It looks so pretty. But every time that they pick up a new marker, crayon, or maybe they're using a different color paint, that's an opportunity for you to label the new color being used. So instead of it being generic, like, I love all the colors you're using, you can say, oh, you're making the sun yellow, or I love the pink flower, or I love the blue truck. And so this might be with coloring, but then you can also label the different types of trucks that they're playing with when you're playing with cars. So maybe you're playing with a red truck and you're saying, oh, that's an awesome looking red truck. Or I like how you're putting the blue truck or blue car down the ramp. So tacting what they're doing, labeling or narrating their play, narrating or tacting, labeling what they're playing with, is a really important skill that they will pick up on over time. You're teaching them the colors, teaching them different colors. So continue narrating and commenting on their actions. I'm going to contradict myself a little later about being genuine. Sometimes it's a little hard to be genuine, and I'll explain why. But respect personal space. Be mindful of physical boundaries, especially if the individual is sensitive to touch. Some kiddos might not love squeezes or hugs, and others may like space. And I had said individual because a lot of people, adults, children, whoever, might not love touch, whether it be a hug or something like that. So, how do I know whether my child is not so much a fan? And like, how do I identify whether they're comfortable or not? Well, look for signs of discomfort, such as whether they have a flat facial affect. So, if someone enjoys a hug or doesn't quite mind it, you might see that they like typically smile when being hugged. Now, signs of discomfort, their face might say it all for you. They might tense up when you go to hug them, or maybe there's no attempt to hug you back. I feel like those are pretty good indicators of not quite loving the physical touch that you're giving them. So then you're going to have to adjust accordingly. Now, if the physical touch is unwanted, I don't recommend that you just totally avoid interaction. You'll just want to remain close in proximity. So, little approximations during every interaction might lead to an increase in affection over time. Examples might include a pat on the back, or rubbing their arm lightly. Maybe it's simple like holding hands during transitions or asking for a high five. If you use little things like that, you'll have to test out what works with your child. And you increase how often you do it over time, it could lead to more affection in the future. Now, it's also important to find common interests with your child. I don't think that all of what they love to do, you're going to find that you like to do. So there will be some compromise. But it is really important to identify activities or topics of conversation that bring joy for both parties. Now, being from South Florida, I've never really had to think about keeping seasons in mind. But now that I'm here in Tennessee, and I'm sure being in Illinois, you guys are even more cold up there. But it's really important to identify some preferred indoor and outdoor activities for the different seasons, or maybe even for a rainy day. So, some examples might be indoors for with painting, or I know the bubbles picture is outside, but you could do bubbles inside as well. A playground outside, going for a simple walk or going fishing. Now, you can also buy an indoor slide. There are different types of indoor activities, like a little trampoline. That's a great one that kiddos love, or a crash pad is fun. But engaging in these shared interests will really foster communication. If your kiddo is more non-vocal and communicates with either PECs or an AAC device, when you're engaging in play with them, they can still ask you for physical interaction. They communicate by requesting different activities, or if you're painting, hey, I more paint, or they might ask for a different color. So that is still a way of communicating.
Natalia, we do have a quick
Yes.
question here.
Okay.
Michelle had asked, do you have any advice for helping others who may not interact with our kiddos as often build rapport with our child, family and friends who mean well but might have trouble understanding our norm?
Yes. I think that it's really important for parents to understand different strategies, and it will be the caregivers' responsibility to teach other members how to build that rapport. And you can do that by modeling and say, like, hey, I want you to pay attention to how I'm playing with them. Because the way we play with our kiddos might be a little different than how the you might play with a neurotypical child. There might be very limited interests, and so we have to really be creative with the items that they do like. But I think it would be a really good opportunity once this presentation is recorded and sent out or made public, to share this information with those members. Um, and I encourage people to just not give up. I think people become very discouraged when they find that, oh, I'm trying to connect with this child and whatever I tried today didn't work. And then they kind of just give up. We can't give up. It can take a long time to create a bond with these children from time to time, like especially if there are limited interests. And so I just encourage to not give up, to try out different strategies, to introduce new toys all the time. Maybe increase the amount of time you're attempting to spend with them. This isn't like a 10-minute task. This is building rapport is ongoing. I have to make sure that I pair with my clients every time I am in a session with them. This isn't just oh, I saw you one time this week. I'm not going to see you again until next week. So I'm not going to talk to you. Like, if I see them at the clinic, I'm always engaging with them. I'm introducing them. to new people and I'm teaching these new people that I'm training, like new RBTs, how to build rapport with our kiddos all the time. Um, so yes, I highly encourage you to teach your members, your family members, and other people what works for your child. If I didn't quite answer that, I can try again later. Um, there will be an opportunity at the end to ask more questions. Now, moving on to another strategy would be to use positive reinforcement. Acknowledge efforts and achievements, no matter how small they are, and do it frequently. So, some examples might be to uh, give some positive reinforcement when your child plays with a new toy. I kind of just mentioned our kiddos might have very limited uh, interests. So they might play with the same couple toys every day. And then the second you see them playing with a new toy, if it doesn't startle them, like throw a party, make it extremely exciting for them. And because you probably feel it, that they're playing with a new toy. Or maybe instead of just lining up their cars, they're playing functionally. Not that lining up cars isn't, I don't know, it's not quite functional, but it's something. But maybe instead of lining them up, they're putting them down a ramp or they're pretending to put gas in the truck. Um, that is huge when a kid finally learns to play with an item functionally. That's a very important skill that they can then they can play functionally with that toy with peers now. Um, and so these are things that you want to provide some positive reinforcement for. Maybe they built a train track independently instead of asking you for the 100th time to build the train track for them. And you're so excited because they can finally do it on their own. But you can also provide reinforcement because you're so excited that they learned how to do it themselves. Providing that reinforcement can help them really gain confidence. So continue to encourage it. Now, this is kind of where I mentioned we might not always be so genuine, but you're going to throw a party because your kid's excited and you want to match their excitement. So maybe they want to show you something and you're like on the phone because you're not focusing on the interaction. This is outside of one-on-one time, but your kid comes up to you and they're like, "Mom or Dad," and they appear so excited. And so you just start screaming and you start matching their excitement. You have no idea what they're excited about. Or they show you something and you're like, "I don't get what the big deal is." Well, guess what? You're going to throw a party. Okay. Um, because your kid's excited and you're excited for them. So maybe it's not always genuine, but praise, praise, praise. Now, with praise, this can encourage this encourages words. Okay. Use praise and encouragement to build confidence. An example. I love behavior specific praise. It's hard to do, but when you get used to it, you learn that you're kind of just narrating and adding more excitement. So, behavior specific, this an example would be, you did an awesome job putting the train track together by yourself. Kind of a long phrase. So another example might be, you built a giant tower, it looks amazing, when they're playing with Legos or blocks. You have now described the action, their behavior, and you added praise to it. You just made it fun. Now, if you don't use behavior specific praise, that's okay. You can say something along the lines of, "That was fantastic," or "Good job, amazing, awesome." And with that, if your child is into it, it depends on the individual. You can also, with that phrase, give a high five, a hug, tickles. So many of my kiddos absolutely love when I provide a behavior specific praise and add tickles in. They get such a kick out of it. And because you're providing that positive reinforcement, they're likely to continue engaging in that appropriate behavior. Now, I really encourage you to be patient and flexible. Um, Allow time for responses and avoid rushing interactions. So, I say allow time for responses because for many of our kiddos, it might take a little bit for them to process what you're asking them or what you're telling them. So it's very acceptable, and a practice that we use is allowing sometimes 5 seconds, maybe even up to 10 seconds for them to respond to your initial question. So I highly recommend allowing some time. It might be silent for 10 seconds. That's okay. It's not awkward. But allow 5 to 10 seconds before repeating the question. If you repeat it too quickly or too often, this can turn into nagging, which is what we consider a punishment procedure. That nagging is not a way to build rapport. If you find that you have waited the 10 seconds and you're like, no, my kid's just ignoring me. Well, that's okay. During rapport building, you're not trying to criticize or anything like that. But attempt to ask the question again. And if you're finding that, no, they're still not responding to me, it's okay. You're supposed to be having fun during this time. Um, so maybe don't ask that question a third time and move on to something else. I also say to be adaptable to their needs and changing moods. Our kiddos can quickly go from wanting attention to wanting space. One of my kiddos will really enjoy a hug for like 2 seconds and then she's yelling at me to put her down. So I don't take offense to it, but I'm going to put her down because like I am now engaging in an activity with her that she no longer wants. So don't take offense. Our kiddos can quickly go from 0 to 100, go from wanting one thing to another, and we have to be adaptable. Another strategy is to establish consistency and routine. Now, you want to create predictable interactions to foster a sense of security. Now, this might include examples or times like school drop off or pickup. When you drop off, maybe you provide a hug or a kiss or a high five, or maybe if your child isn't into physical interaction, then you just give them a wave and you say, see you later, or I love you. And then at dinner time, you expect everyone to sit at the table, the family to sit at the table together. And at bedtime routine, you say, all right, there's a bath involved, we're brushing teeth together, and then the last step is to get in bed and we're reading a book. Regular routines can build trust over time. Now, I don't recommend you engaging in the exact same routine every single night or every day at the drop off pickup. You will want to vary it. Still stick to something, uh, but you will want to vary it because if you stick with this same exact routine every single time, and then for whatever reason there has to be a change in that routine, that might cause a little bit of a hiccup. So come up with a routine, be flexible within that routine a bit, and then that could help avoid some challenging behaviors. But your child is still expecting some type of interaction during those times. Another strategy is to share personal stories. Again, if your kiddo is able to communicate um, and respond and also share their experiences or some stories with you, then this is a great way to create a bond. Now, during play, you might be playing with planes and you mention a time that you flew somewhere, or you talk about a really cool travel story. Or another example might be that your child tells you a story about being at the playground, and you share a time about being on the playground when you were a kid too. Yeah, Johnny pushed me when I got off the swing. No way. Because there used to be a kid named Johnny that had pushed me off the swing too. I don't know. A little silly, but share personal stories with one another. Now, with using humor, I say to use it appropriately, because while this can ease tension and make interactions enjoyable, your kid might not have the same sense of humor as you. So be mindful of that. I would also be mindful of using sarcasm. While some kiddos can pick up on it and it not be an issue, some other kiddos might take sarcasm very seriously. It is a little more difficult to teach sarcasm. Um, just be mindful of using it. I say I like to be silly. A kiddo at the clinic a couple weeks ago had printed out a picture of a dog with a human smile. So, like, picture human teeth smile on a dog's face. And he was so giggly just showing me the picture. And he was like, "Look what I got." And I said, "Oh, what is that? A cat?" And he was like, looked at me like I was absolutely insane. He was like, "This person teaches me things. Like, she did not get that right." And he just thought it was the funniest thing ever. He started laughing. It was a good time. But little silly moments like that can go a long way. Another strategy is to incorporate sensory preferences. I focus more on sensory toys within this, but you'll want to be aware of sensory sensitivities. And so, do they like to play with certain sensory items? This might be things like kinetic sand, Play Doh, some squishy toys. Maybe they like to feel more compression or like to be in tight spaces. So, um, that could be like an indoor swing. Now, something that I didn't include in here, but I thought of a little later on after creating this presentation, was um, being aware of fabrics or like clothing materials. Um, your kid's not going to have fun playing with you if they're not comfortable in what they're wearing. So make sure you understand what the preferences are regarding clothing, and things like that. When it comes to blankets, uh, it could even be like bed sheets. But use sensory friendly environments when possible as well. So a lot of my kiddos like low lighting, so a darker room, and little to no sound. So maybe you have some white noise going on, maybe you can play some music. There might be a kiddo who absolutely loves bright lights and you need to be in a room with like fluorescent lights. Um, and you can be in that kind of environment when you really want to focus on that one-on-one time, and that parenting. Oh, and uh, the bottom right picture, those are Orbeez. If you're a brave parent, I highly recommend, just put them in a really big container. They will go bouncing everywhere. But kiddos love them. They're really squishy and they always seem to enjoy. But just be prepared for a cleanup after. Now, I would also recommend that you encourage expression. So provide outlets for them to express their thoughts and feelings. When they're upset, maybe you provide a stress ball, or you can say, "Hey, like draw out what you're feeling." So you provide them with some things for coloring. Maybe you go to a specific room in the house, or you go into a certain environment that makes them feel comfortable to then talk about their thoughts and feelings. Maybe they want to express their feelings through music because music can you can identify feelings, being sad, you can be happy, you can want to dance and just listen to music, and that's being happy and wanting to dance, like that's still a feeling. um, you can provide visuals. In the top right, I have a visual of a little poster that I have in what I call the quiet corner in the clinic. Um, it's just a little corner where they have a blanket and a bean bag. That way, if they're feeling a little uneasy, upset, or they just feel like they need to calm down, that is a little corner for them. There's a poster. We can talk about how they're feeling. They can point to what emotion correlates with how they feel. And then you can comment on their emotions. Identify for them, like, yeah, point to the picture and say, I realize that you look a little scared or you look a little sad. Um, and validate their emotions to show that you understand and support them. I would really recommend to avoid telling them not to feel something. Like, honestly, if someone were to tell me not to be upset, that would probably make me more upset. So imagine our kiddos already have a hard time regulating their emotions. Don't tell them, don't be upset, don't be sad, don't cry. Let them feel it out, support, and then start engaging in some behaviors like breathing exercises, do a deep breath, and then do some deep breaths together. Or maybe your kiddo can imitate some of your actions and maybe you do some stretching together. But validate their emotions and show support. Now we are at the end here. So just a little bit of a recap. Um, Look for indications of happiness during your interactions and times of building rapport. Remember, rapport building is just ongoing. Um, to pair it, the way I find a difference in them is that rapport building, ongoing, pairing, you're really, really like hustling for X amount of time, and your focus is to just have so much fun. Um, But to build rapport, the things that I think are most important are to be present, to show genuine interest, to find common interests, to always utilize positive reinforcement when appropriate, and be patient. Our kiddos have bad days, just like we have bad days. Um, and make sure that each interaction counts. And like I kind of mentioned earlier when answering that question, it's not going to happen overnight. You're going to have to find different activities, different items, toys, um, and really put a lot of effort into it. So now, if you have time for questions and want to stay on, I can answer any questions that you guys might have. Let me check the chat here. Okay, I see a little bit. Okay. Um, okay. I answered that question earlier. I'm not sure if I can give different advice than what I gave before, but I can try if you guys are still, if you still have that question about advice for helping others to build rapport with your child. Are there any other questions?
Well, just in case somebody is typing a question right now, quick reminder, we will be posting a recording of this on our website. And everybody who registered for tonight's webinar will also get a link to it so you can go back and review it and share it. And I'm not seeing any other questions pop up. No questions here. Thank you for your time and advice. Thank you for joining us. We
Yes,
appreciate
thank
it.
you. And we do have future trainings. So come back for those.
Now
I
we
will
will
be
let you
doing,
know when registration always opens about 30 days ahead of each one. Our next training, if I can pull that up very quickly, is April 16th, and that one is promoting independence. So that'll be opening about mid-March, and you'll get a notification for when that opens up. So I think with no questions, I think we are done for tonight. We appreciate everybody coming here. We hope we gave you some insight and answered some questions for you. And we will let you get back to your evening. Thank you so much for joining us.
good night.